Hi, you guys. Natalie here with Kathryn. Only One United, the place to be. It's been a while since we've done one of these, but we feel it's the right time to come back because there's a lot of change currently going on at United. So, what a great time to talk about it with one of the best journalists around, in my opinion. Kathryn, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm not bad, mate. Thanks for that. Appreciate that.
No worries, no worries. Listen, I just want to get, I suppose, straight into it. I know I said I was going to do it one way, but I thought about it. You wrote a little piece in there, Daily Mail you write for. So if anyone wants to check out your stuff, definitely go on and I put your handle in there. So, go and check out Kathryn's stuff about all sorts of things. But you put something at the bottom of the United Confidential the other day. It was you and Chris and all the journalists that write about it. But, you're the women's football writer. You're who I come to, who a lot of us come to for information. And obviously it was just basically saying, you said it was going to happen. It happened. Polly Bancroft, head of women's football at Man United, been let go. No, not let go. She's gone to Grimsby. We wish her the best. That's great. But then there was a bit of talk about there might be more of a shake-up. Do you just want to go into that story? I know it was like it's happened. Polly's now left. Grimsby's come up. But do you just want to go into it as sort of like what you heard, why it happened, all that kind of stuff, and your views on now she's gone and what might happen?
Yeah, so I think the idea of INEOS coming in obviously was to kind of assess the club as a whole, the two, the men's department, the women's department, and see what changes need to be made. And you can kind of see obviously what's happened on the men's side, that they've gone, they've kind of know they need to bring in a load of backroom people behind the scenes. We obviously pursuit of Dan Ashworth. And that's the same thinking on the women's side, that there needs to kind of be a bit of a big overhaul. And obviously it was a bit unclear kind of what would happen with Polly in terms of whether she would stay or go. And I think from her point of view, an opportunity's come up for her that she might think is better for her, or that kind of secures her future, I suppose. And that's kind of made the decision for them, I think, in that sense. But equally, I don't think they'd necessarily made up the mind on in terms of what was happening with her. She's kind of taken it into her own hands. But the plan, regardless of that, is that there needs to be more kind of experts off the field coming into the club. And that's what I think we're going to see. And obviously replacing Polly is going to be the start of that. And as far as I'm aware, they're drawing up a short list of people in terms of who the best person to replace her is. And, we've seen kind of the way they've worked on the men's side. They've gone after Dan Ashworth, who they think is the best person for that job, the best in that field, and someone that they trust. And I think they'll try and do the same in the women's side as well.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, everyone's seen even the way they got Omar Barada, the way they just did it without anyone knowing, and it just happened. And I think there was a bit of talk of Dan Ashworth, weren't they, when the men was coming in, but then it sort of died down, and then bang, it just suddenly happened. And, now he's on gardening leave and it's being basically wrapped up. So I think they move a lot quicker, don't they, than when the Glazers were here, and it was very slow. And I mean, I think even reading you think that obviously Polly, it's not all on her, the Russo and on the things, but that's what a lot of the complaints were, wasn't it? United are very slow; they don't move quick enough in the market, and it's not criticism all on Polly because she came in and that's the way it was. That's the culture of not even just the women's, the men's. That's how sort of it worked, and it seems like now with the way that they're approaching people and getting it done, they're going to move a lot quicker. Yeah, a lot of people are talking. I mean, here's a name that's already come up. Maggie Murphy. Do you think she's someone that United could go in for? We've seen that she's leaving Lewes and she's very pro and very big in the women's game. Do you think they're going to go for like people like that, or do you think they'll want someone with more WSL experience or more European experience, if anything? What do you think they might look for, or what would you look for if you were doing it?
I mean, it's an interesting one because I think Maggie Murphy would be a great get in terms of how passionate she is. And she's a woman that means business and she knows what she's doing. And I think she'd go in there and ruffle some feathers. So in that sense, I think it'd be great. Whether she whether she wants to go into a club like Man United, the pressure that brings and everything else is potentially another thing. But at the same time, it'd be a huge job. So it's an interesting one. It was one that's kind of, as you say, a bit out of the blue, but I would rate it, I think, if they went for it. What's interesting is obviously, Dan Ashworth and Omar, as you mentioned. Omar specifically, we've seen he was very influential at Man City in terms of, making sure the women's team was kind of run properly, and very influential in terms of backing them as well, which is a good sign in terms of him coming to United. And I don't know how much Dan Ashworth was involved in the women's teams at Brighton and Newcastle, but you look at Brighton in terms of off the pitch, the facilities that the women's team have got, the ambition that's there, and the investment they've made, and also with Newcastle in terms of them going professional, playing at St James's Park regularly. I think they're both good signs in that sense. So they're the two people that know the importance of backing your women's team, and I think they're two people that, once obviously Ashworth comes in, will make sure that things are run properly. And I assume the person that comes in to replace Polly will report probably more so to Ashworth than Omar, but potentially to both of them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I just want to talk about a name, I suppose, as well, that other people might not know, that's sort of gone under the radar, that's left. Sam Barnett. He was sort of involved with a lot of the negotiations. So I think he sort of went early on. But that's like another person. So can you see them making a few hires, not just, I suppose, at that top level, like Polly, like directors, but, maybe negotiations and recruitment? I know there's already a guy there in for recruitment, but, let's talk about, maybe John Merton moving over or having a new job. I don't know how much you know of that. Is that something that, because I did hear that John Merton, he might, because was previously with them, and they might go back to a sort of role like that, but not as senior. I mean, can you see stuff like that happening?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think the Sam Barnett one he didn't get a lot of in terms of, I don't think it particularly went well with him moving over to help Polly with the negotiations. And I think Polly carried a lot of the can for that, probably because she was seen as the women's director. But I do feel like Sam was kind of brought in to try and help, and almost it kind of worked the other way in that then they had too many people working over contracts, and it became kind of a bit of a mess, really. So I wasn't hugely surprised to see him leave. In terms of negotiations, bringing someone in, I think I can imagine that they want somebody in that director or head of women's football role that has experience of transfers and negotiations, because that was, I think, the problem with Polly, in the sense of she'd come in from a role kind of like a general manager type role at Brighton, where I don't know how heavily involved she was in the transfer. She'd done a lot of work in the community as well, and it felt like she was kind of moving into something that was just something she'd not really done before, and that's why people moved over to help her, but it didn't really end up helping at all. So I think they'll look for somebody that actually has experience of working in transfers negotiations. They might bring somebody else in to help them at the same time. Obviously, you mentioned they've got Harvey Bussell over there in recruitment still. Whether he'll stay or go, I'm not 100% sure. But he was kind of, I think, brought in to help on that side. So like I say, INEOS are planning an overhaul, so that could mean more people coming in alongside Polly's replacement.
Yeah, I mean, George has just said something here. Too many cooks never ends well. Yeah, I think that's what a lot of the issues that I heard, especially with all those contracts. They'd pick up the phone, and even when selling players, no one knew who to call, really. And I think that's some issues that we've heard with the men's side as well. You don't know who to call. You don't know who to go to. Patrice Evra said he's ended up having to negotiate a deal. And it's just, I think that was I'm sure they don't want to be seen as that, but that was the Glazers. And I think this is hopefully a new thing, getting names sorted out. I mean, there's a lot of names that have been sorted out, aren't there, Kathryn? We've just seen Leah got signed. Lad's been signed. Heard of other people being signed. I mean, Georgia again saying Garcia, that's one that we definitely want signed. And, I think as well, I know you've been out in England, but Mayer and Grace, these are people that we want to keep. And, you know, a lot of people are saying recruitment's a shambles, needs someone that Bayern has. Barada had a big part. I mean, what do you think, just suppose, on those names and the signings? Do you feel like the squad's going to stay the same, or how do you see it, sort of, I suppose, especially with Grace, because that's one that everyone wants to come back, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, Grace will definitely come back in terms of in the summer, because I think at the minute, I imagine Mark's going to probably wish she could come back now. The way she's playing, she probably, for me, walks into Man United's midfield on current form. In terms of it's interesting because obviously the Leah Galton contracts have been going on for quite a while and got pushed through recently, and I think they were in a process of negotiations with Maya Le Tissier, but that kind of got put on hold because of the Polly situation, and then obviously the international break. So I believe the negotiations were ongoing on that front, but took a pause, and I assume they will probably pick up. Well, you would think they would pick up, sort of now that that's done. But that's the other thing as well. Obviously, with Polly leaving, United will want to have her replacement signed and ready to come in when she's gone, because you want somebody in early doors to start, identifying transfer targets, making sure those player contracts are wrapped up. And I wouldn't be surprised if, people like Omar start getting involved in terms of those players that might be out of contract at the end of the season, in terms of deciding one way or the other whether they're staying or going. I don't know how much of a say Polly will have in that, given she's obviously off at the end of the season.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, fantastic. That's exclusive here. Kathryn said it. Maya. That's who we want to see stay. George is saying, do you know anything about Garcia?
As far I've not heard anything on the Garcia front. Doesn't mean that it's not happening. But that was, I think what I'd been told was that negotiations with Maya and others were sort of put on hold due to when the Polly situation became apparent. So it could be that she is another player been negotiating at the same time.
Yeah. And I mean, there's another thing that I did see. I think it was Nathan, or I don't know if you had a part in it. Someone definitely wrote something, and now Sporty's come here. Mary thought that she might be staying, but I'm guessing that's one that, or do you think that's one they're just going to continue through, because I'm guessing that's a big one they want to keep?
Yeah, I think with Mary, a lot is going to depend on what happens at United at the end of the season, in terms of who the manager is, in terms of the offer that's made to her, in terms of potentially what other clubs might come in for her, and then she'll probably have a decision to make. And I think if I was INEOS and I wanted to make a big statement, I'd probably go out there and make Mary a really good offer to say stay. If she decides to go, then I think you have to say, she wants to go. We did that kind of everything we could to keep her. As far as I was aware, Earps haven't shown any desire to leave in January, despite kind of links with PSG and potentially Barcelona were mentioned, but I don't think there was really anything in that. So I think last summer there was a lot more kind of feeling that she was closer to leaving. But in the last window, there wasn't really kind of any, wasn't pushing for a move or anything like that. But as I say, I think a lot will depend on the offer that gets made to her before the end of the season, and what the club kind of say in terms of, whether Mark's going to stay or go in, the direction the club are going to go in, and also whether another club comes in and makes an offer as well.
I mean, Anton's just doing the questions for me tonight, guys. I love it, love it. Drop a like on it as well, so we can get more people asking these kind of questions, because that's what I like. I agree with Anton. Players will want clarity. Is he staying? Is he going? And I mean, I read you reported again, and that's why you're the best, Kathryn. It's probably going to rely on what he does, and I think it's the same with Ten Hag. I've just listened to a video, and that's why I suppose we do these videos, to talk about it, because we always hear what's happening with Ten Hag, but we don't hear what's happening with Skinner. And he's one that contract ends at the end of the season. It's over, so they have to offer him a new contract. But what they were saying about Ten Hag that I heard, it was more is he the man that's going to be here for the future? There's no point offering him 1 year deal and sort of then you have to sack him or you might have to change him after a year. They're going to want someone. I'm guessing it's going to be the same across Minnesota. They're going to want a manager who's going to be here for 3-4 years, and they're going to want to build with this manager. So it might be in a way easier, maybe if they don't see Mark as that guy, to just sort of wrap it up when it's done. I mean, I'm guessing they're more focused on replacing Polly, replacing Sam, doing those kind of things. But what do you think? I mean, a lot of people, it's not been the best season, is it, with what we've had? I don't think it has. A lot of people don't think it has. And I do think, players will want to know what's the plan around him, whether players want to stay if he's staying or go if he's staying, these kind of things will impact, won't you, like I said with Mary. So just, I suppose, from your point of view, what do you think, I suppose, of Skinner so far, and if you can see him staying or going? And I suppose it's going to have a bigger impact, isn't it? Because a lot of people are looking for managers this summer.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd be surprised if anything happened before the end of the season. I see him staying until then, and then the club making a decision one way or the other as to whether he stays and they give him a new contract, as you say, or whether they look for somebody else. I think the club would have to go on a really kind of bad run, lose sort of 4 or 5 games on the bounce or something like that for them to make a change before the end of the season. It's difficult because on the face of it, last year was a success, second in the table. Obviously, no trophy, but being 1 point off or 2 points off Chelsea. I can't remember how many it was now for the title. FA Cup final, but it has been a lot more difficult this season. I think he struggled to integrate the new players into the team. I don't think it's balancing. I think a lot's kind of been made of United needing to invest more. I think they actually signed some really good players this summer. Have been unfortunate with injuries to Gabby George was a big one. I think maybe not sort of appreciated at the time in terms of the lack of depth at fullback. But at the same time, while he was given new players and some good signings, it was all a little bit rushed. It did kind of come near the end of the window, giving yourselves less time to integrate those players. A lot's kind of been made of the fact that people like JC don't speak much English. You know that before you sign them. But it is another thing to factor in. And I think one of the biggest things was obviously Martin Ho leaving, because the two of them worked very well as a team. Martin was very, very popular among the players, had a big role, and I think it took them until around November, December to bring in an actual replacement. And I just think it's kind of affected how the season's gone, really. And I think Mark would admit himself that it's, they've not been at the same level as they were last season. Finishing 4th would be a huge disappointment. And I think if that is the case, if it's 4th and no trophy, I would assume that the owners probably would look somewhere else. There's still a chance that top 3 and a trophy could happen, but it does look quite difficult at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of answers Darren's question. Good guy. Thanks for asking it. But yeah, it does. It sounds like it's going to be down to where we finish, kind of. But I mean, Mark has made a lot of investment, and I noticed that when INEOS came in, he stopped saying that. But like you said, I do think there has been a lot of investment, and the players that are coming are good enough, and probably even, missing Russo, but getting Mallard and Jason, for me, that's 2 areas you needed: a goal scorer and then maybe that person who can progress the ball, sort of hold up, like maybe not as good as hold up Jace, but I think definitely good at moving the ball forward and creating chances. And I think it just showed how much we missed her when she doesn't play, especially Jade. Jade is a fantastic one. We definitely missed her when she's not been playing. But yeah, she's just that depth in it, and we just don't have it, unfortunately. Do you think maybe the fact that they didn't sign a player in January sort of indicates one way or the other? Maybe they didn't want to back him, or do you think no, just because they were waiting for him?
Potentially it's one way of looking at it. I was quite surprised they didn't try and get anybody in terms of fullback depth, because we knew obviously Jade's injured, but there was a chance she was going to be going off to the Gold Cup. Gabby George isn't coming back anytime soon. Evie Rabjohn is sort of, might be close to coming back, but still a very young player. and there was just like a lack of depth in that area, and I was kind of shocked they didn't try and go for anybody or even any other player sort of in the forward areas or midfield to just kind of strengthen even a loan or something like that. Because you kind of see Chelsea get an injury to Sam Kerr, they go out and this was obviously what Mark Skinner was kind of saying, they go out and he was kind of putting it on the onus. Chelsea go and break the transfer record, Man City lose Jill Roord, they go and pay 200 grand for Blenkild Brown. And Man United obviously didn't have the same approach. Now you could say that is, as you were saying, the owner's going, well, we're not going to sort of panic because we're not sure if we want him long term. If we go and sign a player that he wants, that's not very good business. But it could just also be that there wasn't the players available in the window that they wanted to bring in. But for me, if you thought you had a good chance still of getting that top four and of winning a trophy,
would have
you
seen
probably go out and get those players that you need.
Yeah, because that's why I think, City are probably fighting for that trophy. And last season they didn't really spend in the January, did they? I mean, that's just something I want to touch on a bit more. Gareth is out of contract as well as Mark, and that's going to open up, in the market. Can you see if they do well, City, they'll renew Gareth? So that will be, because we're already fighting with Chelsea, but we've heard they're going to potentially get that Sonia. But, obviously if then City start looking for someone as well, it's going to be, fighting, all top three clubs fighting. Do you think Gareth will stay? Or I know it's sort of not a City podcast, but it will impact us, don't we, if they are looking for managers?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gareth Taylor's almost, even though he's in currently a better position than Mark Skinner, I think he's in the same situation in terms of whether he gets a new contract will probably depend on what City do this season, unless they kind of come out before, in the next couple of weeks and say we're giving him a new 2 or 3 year contract. But I feel like they would have probably done that by now if they were going to do that. And that you look, City could still drop points and end up not finishing, in the top 2 or not winning a trophy or whatever. But they are kind of probably playing the best football at the minute. And from what I hear, I think there was a lot of kind of talk that Gareth Taylor might not have been popular among the squad. From what I hear this season, I think the team are really together. They're kind of behind him, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a new contract if Man City get the trophies this season. If they were to fall short, potentially maybe they say, okay, look, we gave you an extra year, Gareth, you did an all right job, but ultimately you fell short and we're going to look elsewhere. But I think as long as City win at least one trophy and finish in the top 3, I wouldn't be surprised to see him stay.
Yeah, there's one here, Steve H has said something, and I want to come back to it, and I can see all your comments because I think we're sort of answering it as we go along, guys. So if you feel like I'm not, come back, pester me, keep asking them, and I appreciate everyone watching. Suzanne Baker, I think I said her name right, she's the Ajax manager. She's just come out that she's leaving. Do you feel like it'll be the same for United as Chelsea? They'll want a female manager, or do you think it's just sort of any manager? Obviously, Suzanne, we've seen about Ajax, they've done quite well. But do you think that they'll want someone with WSL experience as opposed to just someone in Europe?
The thing is for United, so if Mark's going to go at the end of the season, there aren't many candidates in the WSL to come in really and take that job. I would say Carla Ward would be the only one that realistically you would look at. I think beyond that, I don't think they'd go for Gareth Taylor because you'd be going for if he was out of contract. So you probably would have to go abroad unless they wanted to, have a look at Carla. And yeah, as you say, Bakke has done a great job at Ajax. I think they could give, while Chelsea obviously you still expect them to win, I think they'll probably give them a good test in those Champions League games. I'm intrigued to kind of see just how close they are. But yeah, I mean, in terms of female manager, male manager, I don't know whether that would be a key thing for United or not. They may ask the squad. I think that was kind of what happened at Chelsea, that they asked the players and their preference was a female manager, but ultimately they wanted the best person for the job. I think Emma Hayes was quite keen on it being a woman, but I think the players were kind of, we might prefer a woman, but as long as it's we've got the best person, that's the most important thing. I imagine United's stance will probably be the same.
Yeah, I mean, Alan's just put a name in, Mel Phillips. Do you think she could step up? She was doing an okay job at Brighton, but obviously they felt it wasn't good enough. But for me, I think for the players that they had, I think they were punching high. I mean, what do you think about her? Do you think she could be someone who could step up, or do you think it would be too big a...
I think I'd be surprised. I mean, I think she was very harshly sacked at Brighton. Obviously their position in the table isn't great, but I think they maybe overestimated the signings they made in the summer and the impact they would have. But I don't think she'd be high up the shortlist in terms of the owners looking at, having been sacked by Brighton. I think realistically, if they're looking for a new manager, they'll be trying to target somebody that's got a history of sort of success or, winning trophies. And I still think Mel's got a good future in the game and she'll probably get a job elsewhere. I'd be surprised if it was at a bigger club as United at the minute.
Fair enough. Just one name, I suppose, I want to touch on, and I'm going to come back to Sandevil's comment about back issues in the game, and I think that's what makes it hard, but we'll talk about that. One name I want to touch on who I really rate this season, Robert Villenhelm, and I'm not saying that United will go and get him straight away or anything like that, but he's won things in the game. We can see what he's done with Tottenham. Obviously, their budget isn't the same as United's, but that's a name. That's one thing, and Champions League experience and WSL experience. Could you see? Because I think Vic said she can see us trying to buy people out. I mean, yes, he's only just come, but for me, I think that's what we've seen with Dan Ashworth, with other people. They're just going for people. They don't care if they are the best. They'll pay it, kind of thing. Could you see United maybe that name being on a short list if they were looking at managers?
It's a good point actually. I didn't think of him when I was thinking of WSL managers, but you make a good point. He's done very well at Tottenham in a short space of time, given where they were last season. I think if Man United wanted him and they made him a good enough offer, I think he'd probably go. I mean, I don't know him personally, but I think a lot of managers, when Man United come calling the size of the club, and if he got told he was going to be backed financially, I imagine he would probably go. He seems like a very ambitious manager from talking to him earlier in the season. He's obviously worked with Grace Clinton as well, so he would be a good person in that sense. I think he definitely could be one that they look at. As you say, success in Sweden, so it'd be an interesting one if they went after him. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Paul's saying A if the plan B if A or C if A doesn't work, and I feel like INEOS are those kind of people. Sporty's saying they're probably already identifying. I mean, can you see that maybe that they're already, planning ahead?
Potentially, I wouldn't be surprised. They might have already made a decision on Mark Skinner and say, I mean, as far as I'm aware, they're not going to act before the end of the season. And yes, potentially, if things turn around and United end up in the top three and they win a trophy, it would have to be the FA Cup probably. Maybe they go, oh, actually, all right, Mark, you know what, you've turned things around. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're already kind of having a look at who could replace him, if that's the decision they make, because of the way they're probably looking, what they've done on the men's side. They're very kind of proactive in that sense. And I think Jim Ratcliffe's comments the other day were quite telling. And whatever Manchester United team it is, we want them to be winning. And if the women's team are less successful this season than they were last, I wouldn't be surprised if they make a change.
Yeah, just having some banter here. I'm sorry, I'm going to say your name wrong, but we have seen Mark Parsons at a lot of United games, and I know he's been at a lot of games. He's been at Chelsea game, and I'm sure he's just saying, "Oh, I'm just watching football," but I'm sure he'll want to get back into management. Do you think he'll be a target? I mean, my friend here is saying he doesn't want him, but do you think that those are names that he didn't do that bad, messily?
I think Mark Parsons would love the job in the WSL, the amount of games he's been turning up at. Whether he's somebody that United look at, I'm not sure. He's somebody they might consider. I think, as you say, if the opportunity arose for him anywhere in the WSL, I think he would take it. I think he's quite keen to get back into work. As you say, I mean, he did, done a reasonable job elsewhere, has got experience and seems to be quite a good man manager of players. Whether he'd be top of United's list, I'd be surprised if he was. He might be somebody that's further down on it and someone that they consider. But yeah, I think I like Mark. He's a nice guy, and he turns up at a different game each week, doesn't he? I think maybe on the hope that somebody offers him a job.
Brighton. He's always at Brighton. Listen, this is just a room, and I've seen someone else say when we're going to address it. So this is something. It's not just about Suzanne Barker. It's about sort of the whole of women's football and people that they might be looking at, I suppose, in general. There's talks, rumours about that she has issues with staff on and off the field. I mean, already saying we don't know how true that is. This is the Ajax manager for anyone who doesn't know. There's a lot of things come up, don't they, in the women's game? We always hear, and it's not good that we're always hearing these stories about this manager that, this person that, this director this. So, I mean, how do you think INEOS are going to, suppose, work through people? I mean, I think it was quite telling the way he talked about Greenwood. I'm not saying, not putting her in the same, but, we have to look at our own thing. Even the fact that they hired Omar Barada with the City charges that are coming through. And they said they're quite confident he's not involved or whatever. But, I mean, just I suppose your view on, stuff, rumours about people having problems with staff or people having issues in the past, and then potentially if they come into United, I mean, what do you think? I suppose you can talk specifically about her or the broader thing.
Yeah, I can't really talk about Backer because I'm not aware of the situation around her. In terms of more generally and not kind of being specific, it's quite well known in women's game that a lot of clubs perhaps haven't done the best background checks on managers and coaches. There've been a number of clubs in the last few years that have hired coaches that have had potential investigations or have left under certain circumstances. And have still got other jobs. And I mean, I don't actually know kind of how rigorous those checks are sometimes in clubs, and I think that is something that United will have to consider when they're looking for managers and coaches and other staff. That you do your research and you kind of identify any potential issues with people, because the women's game is still newly professional, and certain things perhaps may have happened before the game became professional when it might have been considered acceptable, but obviously in the professional world it isn't, and we've obviously seen kind of news stories about things like that recently. So, but INEOS have kind of worked in sport for a long time, and they should know that, and they should be making sure that whoever they hire, they do rigorous checks in terms of potential issues that might arise for them if they were to appoint them in certain roles.
Yeah, no, definitely. Vix is just sort of saying INEOS are going about the business quietly, doing the review. It should be completed. And like you're saying, they've drawn up a short list of Polly's replacement. There's other people they need to bring in, or whether it's just like you say, just someone who has the experience of negotiating. And I feel that's what we've missed out on for a while, Man United, and I feel like we need someone who already has those kind of links to just hit the ground running. And the manager wants X, Y, and Z. You've already got a link with that agent or that club, or these are all important things. Paul is sort of making a good point. I know you can't see us when we're saying this, but he wants to hear specifically about the women's team. We have heard those one or two questions where he did sort of say, what did he say? I can't remember. Every team wearing the badge, blah, blah, blah. And then he did sort of mention about the stadium. If they get a new stadium, the women could play at Old Trafford, and then make a village like how City do, and the Olympic Village. And that's all great, isn't it? But it's all very broad, isn't it? And I think what Paul's saying, he knows he's not going to say, yeah, Mark's going and this one's coming and that one's coming. But I think the way he spoke about the men's was but I suppose a lot of people, he's been watching the men's. But the women's have been around a long time as well. We know that, it's well documented what Casey had to go through and blah, blah, blah. And, he's talking about, players that the men bring in, and he brings in a Jose, Styles and all this kind of stuff. And yes, he didn't commit on the specific style. But I suppose, could you see Man United men's style being the same as the Man United women? I mean, what do you think? I suppose, what do you think about Paul saying the interview? Do you think you want to hear more about specifically the women's?
Yeah, I think I can understand where he's coming from in that sense, and potentially maybe kind of being a bit more mentioning the women's team a little bit more and what the plan is. But I think the reality is they're probably still figuring that out, so they probably can't say an awful lot while they're still deciding kind of the changes to make. And that mentioned that kind of overhaul that needs to happen. And I wouldn't really expect Jim Ratcliffe to have a huge involvement with the women's team. In that sense, I imagine he'll probably delegate, and I'm sure he'll show an interest and want it to be successful. But I imagine he will probably allow people that kind of have a bit more experience in terms of running things to kind of take more control, and he'll probably oversee it from a distance rather than kind of being. I don't imagine he'll have a hands-on approach in that sense, and I don't 100% know how much of a hands-on he'll be on the men's side again, because I think that's why you appoint people like Dan Ashworth and somebody to replace Polly, who'll probably report to Dan Ashworth, who'll then report to Ratcliffe. It'll work a bit like that. I think he'll very much probably be at a distance. But I think if he's got the right people advising him from a PR point of view, it'd be good to see him at a match, potentially an Old Trafford game, just to go watch, just to show that he's not. It's not just kind of an all talk, that he's kind of there and that he cares about it. That would be a good PR win for him, I think. But in terms of kind of day to day, as I say, he'll make sure kind of the women's team has that setup of people running it behind the scenes that are the right people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Vicky's saying we need a CEO first. Yeah, 100%. I think what you're saying, being at a match, is very important. We know not Dan Ashworth, what's it called? Brailsford is at a lot of the men's matches. Like you said, it would be nice. There is that match at the end of the Old Trafford that we hope that we like to see people come in. But yeah, Kathryn, I don't know, because I mean we've talked briefly, haven't we, about general and what's going to happen and getting him down to Lee. Yeah, definitely, that's what we want to see. In the North Stand with the Barmy Army. Listen, no, but what do you think? I suppose in terms of now Man United, where it's going, where it was to where it's going to be. I know you're going to jump, but just I suppose for fans that are worried or not worried, or what do you think as a whole?
I think I think this season might be a case of hoping for the best, but maybe accepting that the bigger changes will probably come in the summer, and that it's not out of the question that United can still finish and have a successful season. I'm sure there'll be the players and Mark's going to be trying their hardest to make sure that happens, but the bigger changes I think will come in the summer, and I would like to think it's an exciting time for the club. There's been a lot of years of, under the Glazers, both men and women, where there was a lot of pessimism, and I think, this is a real chance for the club to kind of write its own history on the women's side. INEOS want it to be a success. They want the whole club to be a success. And hopefully if they get those appointments right off the pitch, I think that will have a big impact on the pitch as well. So I think it's just going to be a case of time and seeing how it goes. But I would say the club is definitely in a better position, perhaps not in a better position in the table currently, but off the pitch, it's in a better position now than it was a year ago.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, Kathryn, I just want to thank you for coming on. I'm sure we can always have you back.
Always enjoy it.
When more things are happening, when the clubs are turning more, we'll have you back, and definitely in the summer for the transfer, we'll have you back then. So yeah, listen, if you want to shout out anything, Kathryn, if you want anyone to follow you on anything or read anything, just do it now, and we're going to wrap up, guys.
Yeah, just as I say, it was down the bottom earlier, just on Twitter, and read Mail Sport for women's football.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. Thank you for everyone for watching. Drop a like on it. Listen, I'm going to wrap it up, but if you want me to keep doing videos, let me know. I just thought this is the best time, international break, before you get back into it. You know, let's talk about what's going on. Who do we think's coming in? It's good that we're hearing they're negotiating with players. Yes, it's been on hold, but Mayor negotiations, that's really key for us. Grace is coming back. Who else did we say? Shortlist for directors. So, you know, we're in a better position, but time, patience, it'll come, Reds. Let's go. We're on the way back up. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Kathryn, for joining. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks. See you later.